Dear America, hi, this is the rest of the world talking. Now, we wanted to talk to you about your choice of presidents. In the history of the US, you've had some really great presidents, which actually changed the world for the best. But then again, you also had some presidents that were not so great, that actually affected the world for the worst. But you know what? These are all your choices and we're not going to judge you for them. But however, you need to understand that whenever you choose a president that is not so great, it affects the economy of the world and in return affects your economy as well. This is WhatDaMath, and today we're going to use a mathematical analysis to see if the choice of the next president of the United States will actually turn the world poor again. Welcome and enjoy the video. I think it's pretty fair to say that most of us have a hunch that the American president will actually have a lot of influence on the world, and specifically the choice of the American president in the next election will also very likely either make the world more panicked and will cause another crash, or will most likely stabilize the world economy and will create a new boom in economy. Now, this of course is what this video is about, and we're going to analyze the historical choice of American presidents, because I personally think even though some American presidents were possibly not as famous and not as popular in America, worldwide there were only a few presidents who are not going to be named in this particular video, but you'll see them as soon as we start doing the analysis, that were not that great from the world perspective. And specifically what I'm talking about is how these two presidents actually influenced the economy and made it a little bit worse compared to others. Now, where am I going with this video? You'll see by the end, but let's just start with the basics. Now, we're going to be using the so-called S&P 500 to analyze the American economy, which also will obviously affect the world economy. And S&P 500 is a very, very famous American stock market index that essentially shows the market capitalization of 500 largest companies in the United States. In other words, it's sort of like a representation of the American market, and this shows you how market is doing, and it's often used for that purpose. And at the same time, it's also very, very correlated with the world market. So as S&P 500 goes up, the market in the world goes up, and vice versa. Usually that sort of happens, and because these companies are very influential, and we're talking about companies like Google, also known as Alphabet, Amazon, and so on and so forth. All of these biggest companies that we're all familiar with, including Apple and AT&T and Bellcore, all of these companies are basically represented by this index. This index has also been actually measured quite extensively since at least 1950, I believe. Yeah, there you go. At least January 1st of 1950. So we actually have the data for it for all of this period that we can see on Google Finance and also Yahoo Finance. We can use both of these to sort of see how the index was doing and what the price of the index was at that time. And so what we're going to be using is that index along with the dates of the presidency for each of these presidents that we have here on Wikipedia. And this is going to start with Harry S. Truman because the index starts in 1950s. This is when Truman was the president. Now, all right, so how are we going to do this? So let's take a look at Truman. His presidency started in 1945 and finished in 1953. And the earliest date we have here is January 1st of 1950, when the index was $17.29. So we're going to write that down. When Harry Truman finished his office term, this was January 20th of 1953. And on that date, here we have January 1st of 1953, the stock was $25.29. So you can see there's a slight increase, and specifically this was an increase of by 46%. So since the 1950 until the end of Truman's presidency, the market has actually increased by 46%, and this is true for S&P 500 and will obviously, or has obviously, reflected on the world market as well. The next president was Ike. Ike Eisenhower, also known as Dwight D. Eisenhower, was in the office since January 20th of 53 until January 20th of 61. So he spent 8 years in the office, and during that time, the market has increased from $25.29 to $65.06, and this was an increase of about increased by about 157%. Now, obviously, this was over an 8-year period, but nevertheless, this is when the world economy has improved quite a lot and US was doing really, really well. Next on the list is, of course, JFK. And unfortunately, since JFK was assassinated, his term finished a little bit earlier, but between January of 61 and November of 63, the market has increased by approximately 15%. Now, this was obviously not a full 4-year term, but nevertheless, this was an increase of 15% for the American market. Lyndon B. Johnson, also known as LBJ, spent a little bit longer in the office, so he actually had almost 6 years in the office, and during his term, the market increased by about 35%. Okay, so good so far. And then we come to the president who was not a crook, Richard Nixon. Now, he might be more popular in US than he is worldwide, but in the world, Richard Nixon is still known as the crook. He has a pretty bad image around the world, and I think if you were to ever ask anyone from outside of US of who they thought was one of the least popular presidents in US, they would probably name him, along with another candidate that's on this list. Alright, so Nixon, how did Nixon do? Now, Nixon took office on January of 69, and this is when the stock was at $101.51, so $101.51. He finished his office, or he finished his term on August of 74, because that's when the so-called Watergate scandal caused him to lose his presidency. And so what we have here is July of 74, very close to August, and this is, look at that, 63.54. Alright, Richard Nixon, looks like you actually decreased the stock price and have caused a possible crash. And while Nixon was in the office, the market lost approximately 37%. And so Nixon actually caused quite a dramatic change in the American economy. And this, of course, is because people were panicking, people did not really know what's going on. People lost trust in the government and, of course, in the market. And because of this uncertainty, he essentially caused a mini market crash. Now, obviously, he was not the only cause of this decrease, but he was one of the major contributors. So because of Nixon, we actually lost quite a lot of money back in the days. And when I say we, I don't mean just America, I mean the rest of the world as well. Alright, so let's go through some of these a little bit more quickly, and the next on the list is Gerald Ford, who has recovered approximately 55%, and the market has actually jumped back up. Jimmy Carter, who despite not being really popular in the US, was actually very popular worldwide and is probably one of the more popular presidents in my home country of Canada. But anyway, so in his 4-year term, the market has jumped by approximately 38%. And then we have Ronald Reagan, who spent about 8 years in the office and has actually lived through one of the bigger crashes as well. During his time in the office, the market has increased by about 116%. So he was actually able to convince the American and also convince the rest of the world that the economy is strong and US is a superpower. Then on the list, we have Bush Sr. And during Bush's term, which was between January 89 and January 93. Let's look at the market here. The market has actually increased by approximately 53%. So George Bush Sr. actually did pretty well in terms of convincing the world of stability of the economy. Clinton is next. And during Clinton's 8th year in the office, there was actually the infamous dot-com crash, the bubble that essentially caused the economy to raise really quickly. This was when people were super highly motivated to buy various online enterprises, and then suddenly this became a bubble and it crashed down to about right here. Now, Clinton's term lasted between January of 93 to January of 2001, so we're going to use these two dates here. And on January of 2001, the stock market was around $1,160.33 right here. And despite Clinton experiencing a bit of a trouble with his love life and being caught cheating on his wife with Monica Lewinsky, he actually was able to convince the world as well that the economy is strong, everything is good. And so during his reign, during his time in the office, the economy has improved by about 157%. 6 or actually 7%. That's actually quite incredible. And obviously that was not just his doing, but all things taken into account during his term in the office, this is how much the economy has improved. Then we have George Bush Jr. Also 8 years in the office, and during his term in 2008, we've actually experienced one of the biggest crashes ever. This is what was known as the housing market crash of 2007-2008, and was essentially responsible for kind of, I would say, destroying the world economy. If you actually look at the graph right here, the biggest dip was essentially 2007-2008. This is during his second term in the office. Now let's see how he actually did throughout these 8 years, from the beginning of his term as a president to the end, or from January of 2001 to January of 2009. So in January of 2009, when he finished in the office, the price of the stock was $797. When he started in the office in 2001, the price of the stock was $1,160. So during this time, the market has actually lost about 31% of its value. And so during Bush Jr.'s presidency, we lost about 31% of the market. Lastly, Obama. Now, he hasn't actually finished the office term just yet, but I'm going to use what we have to date to basically see how did he actually do, because, you know, Americans think or consider him to be not very popular. As a matter of fact, he's one of the least popular presidents, but worldwide, he is a superstar. People love him. The economy, because of him, has actually improved quite dramatically. And so let's see by how much. I'm going to actually use the following to do this. So he started in January of 2009, so we're going to go to Google Finance. So we're going to change this left slider to January of 2009. So here we go, January 23rd of 2009 until today's date, which is March 18th of 2016. And this will actually calculate automatically for us what the actual increase of S&P 500 was during his term, and you can see it right here. It's actually in green percentage number on top, and so it's 119 or almost 120% increase. So despite him not being very popular, and despite there being a little drop right here after he actually has taken presidency, most of the time we actually saw quite a dramatic increase in the market. And so this actually puts us at 120% increase in the market. But I think what I wanted to show you here is not the fact that Obama was very popular and that he was able to somehow convince the world of the stability of American economy and increase it by 120%, but I wanted to actually show you these two numbers. So in the world, these two are very, very unpopular. Unfortunately for Nixon and Bush, they're considered to be jokes as presidents. And it shows in the numbers. Now, what does that mean? Who else do we know that is kind of unpopular in the world right now that actually tries to or wants to become a president? What am I trying to say here? Well, what I'm trying to say is this. If American people decide to choose yet another not so popular president that might be also considered to be a clown and a joke in the world, what do you think will happen to our economy? What do you think will happen to your economy? What do you think will happen to the world economy? It doesn't matter that he claims to be some sort of a business guru, which he actually is not. Neither does it matter that he considers himself to be a very rich person, because what's important is that the world economy will very likely crash if he becomes a president. Nobody takes him seriously. He will not give us confidence. People will panic, and the market will very likely crash once again. Things will very likely go wrong for this guy if he becomes a president. So America, make your choice and make your choice right, because what you will most likely do again is cause the world to be poor yet again. Now, obviously, the other candidates might also not be particularly popular or particularly good, but you know what? They're definitely better than this guy. Everyone is better than this guy. And if this guy has you convinced that he's some sort of a businessman guru, there is quite a lot of videos out there that prove that he's definitely not, with most of his businesses failing completely. And a lot of this information is, of course, available on Google if you just type Trump failure, and you can go through things like Time Magazine going through a lot of his failures as a businessman, because he's really not that good. Most of his money has been inherited from his very rich father. But anyway, I don't want to make this video too negative, and what I want to do is basically show you the math. And the math shows you quite clearly that two presidents that the world really didn't like happen to have also been very bad at creating confidence in the market and have even caused the market to lose quite a lot of money. The other presidents that are actually considered to be quite popular worldwide have actually been able to increase the market or convince the people in the world to help increase the market by quite a big margin. So, you know what? The numbers are there. It's for you to make this decision. If you think that a clown can actually improve the economy, you are very likely wrong. Because it takes a very serious president that knows what he's doing to actually make the world believe them, make the world trust them, and make the world invest into the American economy. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more WhatDaMath videos, or if you want to learn more about math, science, video games, and learn through video games as well. I'll see you in the next video. Game you later, and as always, bye-bye.